Hi, everybody. I'm Mr. Wildcat, and I hope you'll have a wonderful day today. Now, in the past, you've seen me reviewing Married Children. You've seen me do food and beverage. You've seen me do a couple of movies and even an episode of Seinfeld or two. But today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different than what you have normally seen me reviewing. This is something that I have been researching on my spare time, on and off, over the past 20 plus years, dating back to my days in high school and college. We're looking at a classic game show. We're going to be looking at a game show review today. Okay, I do have a couple of game shows I do plan on reviewing down the stretch, but we're going to be picking this specific one today because today, on the day that we're recording this, marks the 50th anniversary of the last episode to air from its original version. Okay, we are looking at a classic game show from NBC called Concentration. The NBC television network proudly presents beep 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 Concentration. So basically, Concentration. There's three different versions that have aired between August 25th, 1958, and see to be exact, September 20th, 1991. Okay, and we're going to be reviewing all three versions today. But to give you an idea of what the game is like as a whole, it is basically based on the children's memory game of the same name, created by Jack Barry and Dan Enright. It quickly became property of NBC as a result of the quiz show scandals of the late 1950s. So basically, the show features you have two contestants that are matching prizes represented by spaces on a game board, which would later review portions of a reboost puzzle underneath for the contestants to solve. Okay? So basically, what you have is you would have 30 squares on a board, and contestants would basically take turns picking two squares at a time in an effort to match prizes on the board. Now you have some prizes on the board. Some are really good, and then some are called gag prizes or crappy. They're called gag prizes. Okay. The original one did have some pretty crazy gag prizes, but as the time went on, the prizes got much better. Okay. And basically, you have prizes on the board. You would also have like a take prize. You would have a forfeit a prize, and then you also have that most infamous wild card, which you had two wild cards on the board. And basically, with the wild card is if you match the wild card with the prize, you automatically match that prize, and it went onto your side of the board. You did not officially win a prize until you solved the puzzle. Okay, so you come up with a match. The prizes go into a bank on your side of the board, and those squares will form part of a reboost puzzle. And the first contestant to solve that reboost puzzle got to keep all of the prizes that they had banked during that specific round. To give you an idea of a reboost puzzle, all right, this is a example of a reboost puzzle I want to find on another site. Okay, and these are the types of puzzles that you would normally have to solve. THR and a hoe. Throw. You have the in, and you have the, and you have a T and an L. Throw in the towel. All right. You would have a square that pop up here, and stuff, and then as you progressively match prizes, it would form more into this part of the puzzle. And the first one to correctly solve it, they correctly got to, they successfully got to keep every prize that they had banked on their side of the board. Okay. The puzzles were pretty challenging, and basically, it was fun not only for the contestants, but it was also fun for the home viewers as well. So basically, if you match, you had a take. If you matched a take a prize on the board, of course, you got to basically snatch a prize from your opponent's board. If there was no prizes on their side of the board, then you didn't get to take anything. Another for forfeit. If you want to matching a forfeit, if you had any prize on your side of the board, you were forced to forfeit one of your prizes. If you only had one prize on the board, it automatically went over to your opponent. But if you had multiple, you had your choice of which prize you want to give up and give to your opponent. Okay, and I like to remind you, only the contestant who the first one to solve it was the only one that got to keep their prizes. Okay. Now, basically, that's what the game was like. The original version of Concentration aired on NBC for 14 years, 7 months, and 3,770 episodes, beginning on August 25th, 1958, and running through March 23rd, 1973. To this date, it is the longest continuous run of any game show on NBC. Okay? Now, the show was originally hosted by Hugh Downs in 1958 and would later be hosted by Bob Clayton. But for a 6-month period in 1969, the show was hosted by Ed McMahon, who was Johnny Carson's sidekick from The Tonight Show. Okay? So Hugh Downs, who had basically was on another show that had went off the air, he was offered a hosting gig on Concentration. He was in need of work, and he decided, let's try a game show. So Hugh decided to take a shot at Concentration. And right as the first episode aired is when the quiz show scandals fell apart. All right. So basically, the quiz show scandals what that basically was you had many primetime quiz shows. It was mainly 21, but there were other quiz shows such as like the $64,000 question and Tic Tac Dough and a few others that all wind up getting they all got investigated by Congress after former contestants had decided to take the stand in Congress, and they testified that the producers and the networks had given them answers ahead of time, and they were forced to act or behave a certain way, and they were forced to throw games in an effort to boost ratings. Okay, so as a result of the quiz show scandals, all quiz shows got taken off the air. All they all these game shows were no longer offering big prizes. You basically this is part of the reason why Concentration wound up offering many gag prizes especially during its early years, because you had because it was very hard to win back the American viewers. Like the game show industry literally almost fell apart. Anything related to quizzes were gone for good, but Concentration somehow was they got to stay on, and NBC wound up taking over the show after Jack Barry and Dan Enright got exiled from television. They never would not come back for about another 14 years. Okay, with other projects. Okay. So Hugh Downs got to host the show, and the original announcer, I believe, was Art. Let's see. She was. So Concentration remains the longest running game show on NBC and held the record for longest continuous daytime run on network television until it was eclipsed in March of 1987 by the CBS daytime version of The Price is Right with Bob Barker, which premiered on September 4th, 1972. Concentration, to this date, is currently the fifth longest running daytime syndicated game show, behind The Price is Right, currently in its 51st season, along with the syndicated version of Wheel of Fortune, currently in its 40th season, Jeopardy! In its 39th season, and Family Feud, which is currently in its 24th season. And Family Feud, we're not including the Richard Dawson or Ray Combs episodes because there were gaps in between those. We're talking about Family Feud since 1999, which started with Louis Anderson, then Richard Karn, then John O'Hurley, and finishing up with Steve Harvey. Okay. It was an NBC in-house production apart from the earliest episodes. As a result of the 50s quiz show scandals, the network purchased the rights to Concentration, as well as 3 other games, including 21, Do Re Mi, and Tic Tac Dough, from producers Barry and Enright. NBC Universal still holds exclusive rights to both the format and extant episodes of Concentration. However, due to financial interest and syndication rules, this version is owned by CBS Media Ventures. Okay. Concentration's original host was Hugh Downs. The show was produced and broadcast live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on weekdays in black and white and quickly became the most watched daytime series on NBC's lineup. Original announcer was Art James, who sometimes served as a substitute host and would later become a game show host in his own right. This version of Concentration was produced in NBC Studio 3A in New York City at Rockefeller Plaza, which is currently the home to both NBC News and MSNBC. In addition to the daytime run, two brief runs aired in primetime in 1958 and 1961. The 58 primetime version was hosted by Jack Barry before going into exile, and the other one was hosted by Hugh Downs. The show then moved to 11 a.m. and slowly introduced colored broadcasts. For a picture puzzle game whose reboosters were designed and painted in monochrome, this required some design changes. The colors of the numbered cards might otherwise interfere with the colors used on the reboots, a critical issue for contestants playing in the studio and for viewers who played along at home. During this period, the series was produced in NBC Studio 6A. Hugh Downs, by this time, was also an anchor correspondent on NBC's Today Show, remained host of Concentration, and announcer became Jim Lucas, who worked on NBC's local radio station WNBC AM. In 1965, the show moved to a 10:30 a.m. time slot where it remained for its remainder of the run on NBC. In January of 1969, Hugh Downs stepped down to devote his entire attention to the Today Show, at which point announcer Bob Clayton, who had been announcing Concentration since 1963, succeeded Jim Lucas as, all right. He wound up succeeding Hugh Downs as the host of Concentration. Okay. He wound up taking over as hosting duties. Introduced as the new host at the program's 1968 Christmas episode, dressed as Santa Claus, NBC staffer Wayne Howell moved to the announcer's booth during Clayton's tenure as host. However, in March, advertiser pressure led NBC to Clayton aside in favor of Ed McMahon after viewer complaints and declining ratings. Bob Clayton would return in September and would remain host until the show's end in March of 1973. On the Monday following Concentration's cancellation, Clayton became the announcer for the $10,000 Pyramid on CBS, which was hosted by Dick Clark. Okay. There are some special features on the original version. Now, basically, one thing I'd like to add. There was no bonus round in the original Concentration. Okay? You won the game, you got to play another game against another opponent. Once you won 20 games, you retired as an undefeated champion. And then at the end of the season, beginning in 1963 and moving until the show's end in 1973, they would do a Tournament of the Champions with the contestants who won the most games during that show during the previous season. The winner of the Tournament of the Champions, they wind up receiving this famous trophy, like the Thinker. They also won a trip around the world as well. One of the most famous contestants to ever play Concentration was a lady named Ruth Horowitz, who had unfortunately passed away about 11 years ago in 2012. She basically won 20 games, retired as a champion in 1966, returned for the Tournament of the Champions, and won that tournament. Okay. She also won the trip around the world. In 1996, there was an episode of Oprah Winfrey. Oprah wound up doing a special on game show winners, contestants who were big winners on game shows, and they wind up. You had Tom McGee, who at the time was the biggest winner on any game show. He won like $312,000 in 40-something appearances on Tic Tac Toe. You also had Ruth Horowitz, who was a retired, who was the most successful contestant out of concentration, or one of the most. Ruth Horowitz was only on Oprah for about 30 seconds, and basically they said that Ruth had won a trip around the world, and unfortunately she had little kids at home, and she was unable to find someone to watch them while she went on her trip. So unfortunately, she was forced to surrender her trip. Such a shame. Okay. Ruth Horowitz, since concentration became forgotten until 2004, when Ken Jennings made his surprising role. He made his surprising run on 74 victories and $2.5 million on Jeopardy in 2004, which at that point sparked a huge interest in researching contestants who had made long runs on previous game shows. Tom McGee, he resurrected his career. It also gained an interest in knowing who Ruth Horowitz was. And that's the first time I'd ever heard about Ruth, was when it was on a game show news website produced by Steve Beverly. He wind up, okay, he basically did a story with Ruth Horowitz as a contestant in concentration. And unfortunately, I don't really know whether or not her episode still exists, and I will get to that in a little bit. Okay? But there were basically a wide variety of special features that were done on the original concentration. Okay? Seen daily for nearly 15 years and constantly one of the most popular series ever on NBC, the original series included many special features. Some of them include the envelope and its mysterious contents, which was a winning contestant opened a sealed envelope and read its message aloud, as she were the show's announcer. Generally, it mentioned an inexpensive prize, and further reading proved it to be an expensive prize, such as a large amount of cash or a new car. You also had the cash wheel. A contestant spun a carnival wheel containing various dollar amounts with the top prize of $2,000. And might I add, this was before Wheel of Fortune. All right, so don't think that concentration stole this concept from Wheel of Fortune. You also had a wide variety of Christmas shows that featured children from the United Nations countries. You also had Secret Santas, including Joe Garriola, Victor Borg, and other celebrities. Proceeds went to CARE, C-A-R-E, which built 2 schools in Africa from funds raised by the series. Norm Blumenthal, who was the show's producer, and Hugh Downs, they both received awards from the organization for their proceeds. You had international salutes. All prizes in these games were from specific country saluted. For example, a salute to Mexico had contestants wearing sombreros. Hugh Downs dressed as a matador, and model Paola Diva played a colorfully costumed senorita driving a mule-driven cart. You also had the infamous Challenge of Champions. Beginning in 1963, Concentration inaugurated a Tournament of Champions, which pitted the top 4 contestants of the previous 12 months in a best of 7 tournament, styled in a tournament similar to the World Series. Grand prize was $1,000, a trip around the world, and a special trophy dubbed the Connie, modeled after August Rudin's The Thinker. One of the participants in the very first tournament was Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Ralph Branca, who had won 17 games on the show. Throughout the competition, participants, including Downs, Clayton, and Blumenthal, wore blue blazers with the show's logo embroidered in gold on the breast pocket, a surrealistic amalgamation of all 13 letters in the word concentration. This was known as the mystery logo. The logo and the blazers continued to be part of the host's wardrobe until the network version of the show ended in 1973. The logo was not used in the syndicated version of the show, okay, which we'll get to in a little bit. During another contest in 1970, home viewers could win a prize based on the initial of their last names corresponding to a number on the board. To enter the contest, one merely had to send a postcard to the address given. These postcards were placed in a rotary drum, and Clayton would draw a card and read the name. If the prize card was for a gag prize or forfeit one gift, the home viewer received $100. If it was a take one gift, it was a $250 prize. If it happened to be a wild card, the home viewer won $500. And might I forget to add, if a contestant basically, if they matched the two wild cards in a single match, at first they won a cash prize, win or lose, which later turned into a brand new car. Okay. Throughout nearly all of the original series runs, the program was produced by Norm Blumenthal. He not only created every one of the 7,300 prizes used on the show, with no repeated puzzles, but also every prize utilized in all 24 editions of the Milton Bradley home game. All right, and I would not be surprised if he did this one as well. Okay, so for most of its run, Concentration faced sitcom reruns on CBS and local programming on ABC affiliates, easily dominating in the ratings, which explains why Concentration was so successful. It was also the last program on NBC to convert from black and white to color, which happened in 1966. And might I add, during the show's 15-year run, it was reported that they wind up giving away over $10 million worth of cash and prizes in just that show's run. Okay. However, the downside of Concentration came in September of 1972 when CBS launched The New Price is Right with Bob Barker at 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central, and drained off more than half of Concentration's audience. Rather than move the game, NBC concluded that it has reached the end of its life and canceled it on March 23, 1973. While the first puzzle on the debut was It Happened One Night, the last puzzle on the finale was You've Been More Than Kind. On the last episode of the show, basically the final puzzle was You've Been More Than Kind. The game unfortunately did not get finished, and what happened was, because it was the last game and the last show, the producers decided there was a birthday present prize on the board, which was $100 for each year the show had been on the air, so $1,400. They took the birthday present, split it in half, and gave $700 to each of the two final contestants on the show. Very generous prize for 1973, might I add. After Clayton said a final goodbye, which was very brief, he did not. He really didn't want to say goodbye because he would basically get teared up, and he didn't want to mention names because he would forget. He would basically forget people. So, out of respect for everything, he basically just said a simple goodbye. Thank you for playing Concentration, and we will see you again somewhere down the road. The credits rolled over with the redemption of Old Lang Syne. Concentration's time slot would get replaced by Baffle, which was a Merrill Heater Bob Quigley production hosted by Dick Enberg, and it would run until March 29th, 1974. Okay? So that was the NBC daytime version, the original one. Okay? And that was not the end of Concentration. 6 months after Concentration ended on NBC, about 5 months later, the network called upon Mark Goodson Bill Todman Productions to produce a new edition of Concentration for syndication. This marked the first time that both Mark Goodson and Bill Todman were asked to produce a format owned by another production company. Each of all their previous productions were conceived by people on their own staff, such as The Price is Right, What's My Line, To Tell the Truth, I've Got a Secret, and Password. Okay. Oh, and Match Game too. The new syndicated Concentration premiered on September 10th, 1973, ran for 5 years with Jack Narz as host, with Johnny Arson serving as the show's announcer. Concentration moved from NBC studios in New York City to Metro Media Square in Hollywood, California, and aired primarily on NBC stations that had carried the original series. It was produced as a daily series, which was 5 episodes a week. But at the time, many game shows that aired in syndication were only airing once a week, and some stations wind up airing concentration. They wind up airing the concentration in the same manner as well. Okay, leaving many episodes unaired for many viewers. Okay, so unlike the original concentration, the revival with Jack Narz did not have any returning champions. Okay, two new contestants competed each day with no returning champions. The games did not straddle episodes as on the network version, mainly because um, some affiliates only broadcast the program one evening a week, and they did not want to throw anybody off. Okay. During the show's first 2 years, the basic game was identical to the NBC version, with the addition of 4 head starts that revealed half the locations of 4 prizes on the board. In addition, the gag prizes had disappeared, and only 1 pair of forfeit one gift cards remained, with 3 pairs of take one gift cards were hidden on the board. Concentration's new board also became very colorful. 30 numbers, which were now larger, are now in red and yellow backgrounds with the red frames and the mechanical trilons turning a little faster than the NBC version. Many prize forfeit taken wildcard spaces had actually come from New York with the original board and were reverse printed white lettering on a black background. The reboost was in full color on a sky blue background. The cash prize, if a contestant solved the puzzle with no prizes on his or her side of the board, increased from $100 to $250. A bonus for 2 wildcards on the same term wound up giving the contestant $500 win or lose, as opposed to a new car that was offered by NBC. The bonus was once again theirs to keep regardless of the game's outcome. In addition, unlike in the NBC version, the contestant no longer received the opportunity to match the wildcard spaces and reveal 4 parts of the puzzle. While the same types of mechanical prizes were available, the syndicated series also featured prizes that would normally be consolation prizes on other shows, such as Rice-A-Roni and Bon Ami Cleanser. Okay? Beginning in 1975 and continuing through the spring of 1976, a series of changes were implemented to speed up gameplay. The forfeit one gift cards were removed from play, and 2 more wild cards were added to the board, with the prize for matching them reduced to $250. The first game of each episode became a 3-call game, in which a contestant who failed to make a match with the first 2 picks was allowed to call a third number. If the third pick was a wild card, the contestant could match it to either of the 2 already revealed prizes. The 3-call rule was later implemented in the second game as well. In addition, 2 free look spaces were added to the board during the first game. If one was uncovered, the contestant saw the piece of the puzzle behind it and got a free guess without having to match cards. All the remaining original Trilon cards were scrapped and replaced with new graphics. The reboosts were also made shorter and easier. All right. So unlike the original version of Concentration, there was an actual bonus round that came around with the Jack Narz version. Okay, and it was called Double Play. You basically, the contestant who solved the puzzle, they not only got to keep the prize on their board, but they also got to play a bonus round called Double Play. And they had 10 seconds to solve two reboost puzzles. The first one was worth $100, and the objective was to solve that first puzzle as quickly as possible, because whatever time you had left on the clock after solving the first puzzle is all you had left to solve that second puzzle. And if you get that second puzzle solved with whatever time you had left, you wind up winning a brand new car. Now, a brand new car was the original prize for the double play, which later transferred into either a car, or it wound up transferring into many different prizes. Okay, that you could possibly win. You wind up playing a mini memory game where you had 9 squares on the board. You picked one number at a time. First prize that you wind up matching was the prize you were going to win if you solved both puzzles in the double play. Okay, that was towards the end of this version's run. All right. Now the music for the double play win was later used on The Price is Right during prize descriptions for a car. Many other cues from The Price is Right were also used on Concentration, including music used for the head starts and double play prize descriptions. Okay. Now, unfortunately, despite many changes, show's ratings fell on many stations, including former flagship WNBC in New York, which had moved the show to either pre-dawn hours or other non-primetime access hours, and dropped it entirely in the spring of '76. As a result of some of these changes, some independent stations wound up picking the show up for its final 2 years. On September 8, 1978, the second version of Concentration aired its final episode and left the airwaves except for a series of markets who opted to air reruns of the entire season until the fall of 1979. Okay? In January of 1987, which was about 9 years after Jack Narz's Concentration left the air, Goodson Productions sought permission from NBC to relaunch Concentration. The new series would become known as Do Not Ask Me. It was known as Classic Concentration. Do not ask me why they went with Classic Concentration. But if you know why they decided to go with this name, please let me know in the description in the comment section below. I really want to find out. Okay. They wound up hiring Alex Trebek to host this version of Concentration, who at the same time was also hosting Jeopardy. All right. And they also brought in Diana Taylor as the series' prize model. However, on July 22nd, just about a few months after the show started, Diana Taylor got replaced by Goodson's daughter, Marjorie Goodson Cutt, and remained on there to the end of this show's run. Gene Wood was the show's announcer, with Art James substituting for him for several weeks in 1991. The new Classic Concentration ran once again at 10:30 a.m. Eastern and remained as slot throughout the entire show's run. Classic Concentration's final new episode aired on September 20th, 1991, but reruns continued to air on NBC from October 28th through the end of the year on December 31st, 1993. Now, basically, there are a bunch of changes to this version of Concentration. First of all, instead of having 30 numbers on the board, there were 25. Okay? No more Trilons. This puzzle board was all electronic. You basically, it is gone in, it was basically an 80s version or a more updated version of Concentration. You pick a number, you have instead of hearing a Trilon move, you pick, all right? You base it, for the most part, you got to have you got one square that disappeared off the board completely in order to offset the different matches that they had on the board. They still had the wall cards on there as well. And if you got to match the wall cards, you still got a cash prize, win or lose. I think it was see, 2 wall cards in one turn was a $500 bonus. If the third was chosen in the same turn, the bonus turned into $1,000. All right. You also the forfeits were also gone as well. Instead, you had a green take and a red take. You match either one of the takes. You had a little take marker that was given to you by Alex, and you had the option of using it right then and there to take one of your opponent's prizes, or you can save it for later on in that round. You could not carry that takeover into other rounds. You had to use it in that same round, and if you did not use it, it went away. Okay? And basically, the first contestant to solve the puzzle, they got to keep the prizes, and they wound up going into a different type of bonus round. Okay? Probably the most famous one of them all. It was basically a car fantasy round or something. Let's see, what do they call it? Winner's Circle. All right, not to be confused with the $10,000 pyramid. Okay. Bonus round, dubbed as the winner's circle, was played for one of 8 cars that were displayed in the studio. Contestant was shown a board of 15 number panels, behind of which you had 7 of the 8 cars matching pairs with the eighth car used as a decoy. Contestants were given a base time of 35 seconds to play the round, with 5 seconds added for each time the round was not won. Match all 7 cars within your given time. You won the last car that you had won. All right? And each time the car was won, the clock was reset to 35 seconds for the next round. All right? June 29th, 1990, the format of the clock was changed so that the new champions were given a base time of 35 seconds and were given an additional 5 seconds for each return to the bonus round until they had won a car. Early in the show's run, a contestant could win the game and play the bonus round up to 5 times before being retired. Beginning December 30th, 1987, contestants were retired undefeated only after winning 1 car. From the premiere through June of 28th, 1990, contestants could win up to 5 matches. Occasionally, 5 bonus car seconds was a prize appearing in the main game. Any contestant who had matched the prize and solved the puzzle earned 5 additional seconds in their next attempt to the bonus round. Okay. So in terms of returning champions, each match consisted of 1 game, with the winner advancing to the bonus round. A losing contestant left with parting gifts, except if their game was interrupted, in which he or she would return for the first game on the next show. On July 5th, 1988, the show experimented with a best 2 out of 3 match format during their special summer college student week, with the first contestant to solve 2 puzzles, winning the match and playing the bonus round. The format became permanent on August 9th, 1988. Unlike most game shows whose episodes tended to straddle, playing a best 2 out of 3 match, Classic Concentration had each match and bonus round fit into one complete episode. The first game was split over the first 2 segments, with the second and or third game, if needed, taking up the third, and the bonus round playing during the fourth. From June 29th, 1990 to the series finale, the game was changed once more to a 2-strike format in which contestants were allowed to keep playing until they either won a car or lost 2 games, whichever came first. With this format, the show went back to playing the main game and the bonus round twice each day. In each half of the show, whichever contestant solved the puzzle went on to the bonus round, while their opponent received the strike on a small box on top of his or her podium, an illuminated gold square with a black X in the middle. If the contestant got 2 strikes, they were eliminated from the game completely, but they got to keep whatever cash or prizes they'd won up to that point. Okay? So, alright. So now that we have known that, so basically, what has happened, okay, with concentration since NBC pulled the plug in 1993? Okay? Well, basically, for the longest time, concentration disappeared from the public for about 25 years. Okay? In 2018, 25 years after Classic Concentration left NBC, the show was given the episodes of Classic Concentration with Alex Trebek made their way onto a game show channel called Buzzer. All right? Game Show Network had tried for many, many years to get their hands on this version of Concentration. But unfortunately, they did not have any luck. And it seems like Game Show Network had a very they didn't seem to get along with NBC very well, evidently, because they had a very hard time trying to get their hands on properties that had been owned by NBC. So basically, since 2018, Classic Concentration has aired has basically aired on a regular basis on the Buzzer channel. So if you are looking to explore more about how concentration's played. This is probably the best way, the best version out there that is being rerun that you can, like, your best opportunity to see how concentration was played. Okay, the Jack Narz version was uncertain for quite a while, but in March of 2020, 3 years ago, Buzzer finally got their hands on the Jack Narz version of concentration, and by the end of the month, they began airing the Jack Narz version of concentration with starting with episodes back in 1976. Okay, we're not sure what happened to the other episodes. Okay, now for the original version of concentration. What has happened with that? Well, much harder to explain on this one. Okay, quite but quite honestly, nobody seems to really knows what happened with with this version. Okay, um, this there are rumors that this version had gotten wiped out per common network practices back in the day, where they would basically take the episodes were recorded on these huge, gigantic videotapes, and videotapes were very expensive back then. They were very expensive back in the day, and of course, game shows and talk shows and soap operas, they were the easiest targets for wiping because they were considered a one and done. Okay, back in the day, nobody knew back in the 60s and 70s. Nobody would even imagine that there would be a future for game shows or talk shows or soap operas, and it would basically it would cost so much money and so much space to store these tapes in vaults. And okay, considering how expensive the tapes were and the basic and the what they figured like what would be the future of, okay, since there was no future, they didn't see any future for these particular programs. So they basically took a look at the cost and they said, that's we don't see these episodes resurfacing back on the air after their original airing. So let's reuse them. They would get wiped out. They would get erased, and they would get re-recorded with new programming. Okay. Now, Mark Goodson, Bill Todman, they did a very good job preserving their particular game show libraries, and I think the main reason why the Jack Narz version still exists, aside from the fact that it was produced by Mark Goodson and Bill Todman, was the fact that this was also in syndication, which basically, had it aired on NBC daytime, chances are it wouldn't have survived. Because NBC reportedly did not stop wiping their daytime programming until 1980, and in some cases into the mid 1980s. Okay? So basically, there was a source I had read that there was an interview that Norm Blumenthal had basically said that once the episode aired, they kept the tapes for 90 days after their original airing, for standards and practices and stuff. So like if standards and practices had to go back and look at a particular episode to investigate the integrity of that particular episode, they were able to go back and look at it in order to decide whether or not contestant was worthy of a prize. Okay. Once the 90 days hit, then they would get reused. Now, even though the tapes got reused and stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that this version of concentration is gone for good. Okay. Although a huge chunk of it might be. We don't know. There are other rumors out there that this version of concentration exists in kinescope form. Okay, so kinescope, you put a camera up against a monitor that is televising. Okay, you take that the feed that makes it onto the final tape is shown on this monitor. You put this little camera up against the monitor that's showing the final feed for the episode that will show up on the final tape. and you make a copy of it. And the purpose of this would be to rerun it on other sides of the coast. All right, or in some cases, an effort to store these episodes in a lesser quality that would not take up as much space as these huge, gigantic tapes. All right. So some sources say concentration's gone forever. Other sources say that they're in kinescope form, stored in NBC vaults that have yet to be released. We don't really know exactly what has happened. And any of you guys do happen to know what has ever happened with this version of with the original concentration, please let me know in the comment section below, because I would like to know a lot more about what's happened. But here's what we do know for sure. All right. There is a handful of kinescope recordings that are held by the Library of Congress. There is also a video company called Shokus Video, Shokus. They specialize primarily in public domain offerings. They also offer a Hugh Downs hosted Tournament of Champions episode from 1967. All right. The final episode also does air in a color kinescope format, and some of these episodes that you have seen, they do they've been uploaded onto YouTube, so you do have those particular episodes. Most of the episodes that have been uploaded are unfortunately from the Tournaments of Champions that have those puzzles are much more difficult, and they do that on purpose because they are there to challenge. Okay, these are supposed to be the best players to have ever played concentration, and they want them to be to play at the level that they are expected to. Okay. So there's a bunch of Tournament of Champions episodes that do exist. There's a Christmas episode or two that's been uploaded. The final episode is the only episode known to survive in color is up there as well. Whether or not this original version, like whether they will find the remaining episodes of Concentration in the NBC vaults, we don't know. So hopefully someday they will get scooped up. All right. NBC, we are long overdue for a new version of Concentration. Okay, might I add. And rumor has it a few years ago, Concentration NBC decided they were going to revive Concentration to compete with Let's Make a Deal, which was revamped about 13, 14 years ago with Wayne Brady as host. They wanted to put a version of Concentration up against Let's Make a Deal in an hour format with a high-tech board. At the very last minute, Concentration got shut down in favor of an extended version of the Today Show. So there is no luck right now, but I do highly encourage you guys to write into NBC and let them know that you are hungry for a new version of Concentration. And if there is enough demand for it, and if the network executives are willing to eager that they can get higher ratings for Concentration than an extended version of the Today Show, who knows? Maybe they'll consider it. All right. So that is all we have for today. There will be a few other game shows that I will be reviewing down the road, but you're going to be in for a nice treat when they do come out. Okay? Until the next time we meet, Mr. Wildcat, remind you to be good, be careful, and behave, and thank you for playing Concentration today. So long.